All right, we are back with another episode, and I'm actually joining you from Chiang Mai in Thailand, and I'm literally recording this introduction from a hospital room because my little girl contracted RSV while we were in Thailand, and we've been in this private hospital in Chiang Mai for the last 3 days, but she's doing really well and she's looking really good. But it's also just a really important note to always have private travel insurance when you are traveling. If you can afford to travel, you can afford to get travel insurance because my gosh, it's been so easy with travel insurance. They've been calling us up, checking on how we're doing. They've been communicating directly with the hospital. They're helping us book the flights we missed. It's amazing. So shout out to travel insurance. Now, in this episode, I sat down with Glen James and Rachel Kroon, who are the co-authors of the Quick Start Guide to Your First Property, to break down what the latest government initiatives actually mean for first home buyers and whether it will make it easier to get onto the property ladder. But what we've already seen is property prices finally starting to ease in parts of Australia. So yeah, if you're thinking, is now the right time to buy? That's what we unpack in this episode. So if you are interested in property ownership and you want to buy your first home, we've got a free online property workshop coming up with Grace Bow, the wonderful mortgage broker. So you can head on to our website and sign up to that for free. And very excitingly, we've got our online wealth summit coming up. This is one day full of Australia's leading money and investing experts. They'll be sharing all their practical strategies. Every year, it's so good. People learn so much, and it's totally free for you to attend. So make sure, again, you go and sign up for that. Again, you can do that via our Instagram page at Ladies Finance Club or our website, ladiesfinanceclub.com. All right, let's get into this week's episode. Well, Rachel and Glen, welcome to the Get Rich podcast. Super excited to have you both on today. Now, anytime someone brings out a book, my first question is always, why this book and why now? So maybe, Rachel, do you want to take it away for us? Where did this book come from?
It really came from wanting to create a resource for first home buyers. But I guess whether people are wanting to buy to live in or wanting to buy to invest or trying to figure out which one of the two is going to suit them better, we really wanted to be, I guess, a roadmap for people to get into property and, yeah, just demystify all of the things that they might come up against along the way.
And Glen, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think what we had noticed with our podcast listeners and particularly around the particular audience, a lot of time when we do stuff, and it'd be like your own type of community, Molly, is like you do something because you see a need with your audience and your community. And we just wanted to be like, hey, we still think it is possible to buy your first home, whether it's a house or an investment property. And here's what we think is a really good practical start to get you thinking. Because there's a lot of pendulum swinging with first home buyers where it's like, oh, I want to buy a new home to live in, but I can't live there. Well, I could buy an investment property, but I'll lose my first homeowner grants. What do I do? So we just wanted to bring some clarity to that whole process for people.
I love that. And I also just find when it comes to property buying, people just need to, they love to know a lot before they do it. It's very rare someone just jumps straight in. They like to do the research. They like to read the books. They like to also do that mindset work as well. But I'm interested to know, since writing the book, we've seen housing policy changes, budget announcements. Did that change the direction of the book at all, or did it kind of just reinforce what you were already saying?
Well, I think that the fundamentals of buying property hasn't changed. There's a few little tweaks in, negative gearing and things that might have changed, but buying a home hasn't changed. And I guess the tools and the resources that people know about, I guess, the buying process, but also how to get financially prepared to buy a home before you even start that journey, that hasn't changed. So I don't think it's made any changes to the book, which is great for us.
Yeah, because that's right, because none of the recent budget changes that have been announced in May or June impact someone buying their first home or their principal place of residence. So the concepts still 100% stack up.
One thing it has given first home buyers, though, which is very time critical, is an opportunity. So it's very timely that the book is coming out at a time that is such a great, opportunity for first home buyers.
Absolutely. And with the changes, just one last question on this. Do you think we needed to see a change like this to kind of level out the playing field a little bit more for those first property owners?
I mean, I'll jump in because I'm a bit vocal on this. I think out there in Australia property land, I don't know if it could have got any worse for first home buyers. So we know one thing, if these changes don't work, if the populace is not happy with it, I think we could probably be confident that there might be some tweaks if the population actually are not happy with it and throw out the government to put someone else in who will make the changes back. I don't think that will happen though. I think life does go on, and I don't think it can get any worse for the first home buyer. So I'm okay to see how this plays out.
Look, it is a particularly hard time for first home buyers, and I don't think that has changed with the budget. But I think people need to be encouraged at times like this that, you know, you can still buy a home and the fundamentals haven't changed. And you may need to start getting organised to buy a home earlier than you did before. It might be a 2 or 3 or 4 year process to be ready to buy a home. And we want people to pick up this book well before they're ready and help them go along that journey to make sure they can buy a home. If it's not today, maybe it is in 5 years' time, but let's start that preparation.
Absolutely. And I always see two types of people. I see the people who are like, I'm going to become a property owner no matter what. And then I see the people who go, it would be nice to own a property, but we'll see. And it's always like the person who takes action. They see the mortgage broker, even when they're starting out with zero. They start looking at what government schemes are available. They really believe that they can do it. I always see them actually go through and buy that property. But I would love to know, what do you think is the biggest misconceptions Australians have about buying their first property? And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this.
All right, dealer's choice. Go, Rach.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's impossible now. I think that the media has put a lot of thoughts into people's heads about it being impossible. And we're dealing with, 22-year-olds every day that are buying their first home. And I think there are people that are doing it every day, and there's people that are getting caught up in that it's impossible. And I think mindset is such an important part of the process. So if you can't do it in what you're looking at, how can you do it? What are the other options if you can't get in? So I think one of the misconceptions is that it's impossible. But another misconception is that you have to buy a house to live in. And I think that, people think, well, I can't afford to buy to live in. And we've been seeing this for a very long time, long before these changes and long before the prices have been where they are. So I will just rent. Well, there's other options. So getting into the property market is so important. So I'd hate people to be discouraged by that, misconception.
Yeah, it's funny. When we threw to Rach first, I was like, I'm going to write down my notes because I'm an adult and I plan. And the first row, I wrote the word impossible down, and Rach said it. But I think one of the misconceptions, and this is a bit of a high horse of mine, is people think I can't do it, which that is a bit of an iteration of impossible. But let's unpack this. If you want something bad enough, you will put systems in place, you will go after it. And if you want that first home sooner than later, we're not doing consumer debt. We're not having car loans. We're not having personal loans. We're not doing Uber Eats. There, I said it, sue me. Like, we are getting very intentional of putting a plan in place to achieve our goal. Anyone who ever done anything of significance, sacrificed, coupled that sacrifice with time. And also one thing we talked about in the book is the underlying why. So I think it is possible. And this isn't just don't have avocado toast and get a better job. It's about this mindset shift that this is something that I or we want to move towards. So let's put a plan in place. Let's get up to speed with the steps that are involved.
Absolutely. Where there's a will, there is a way. Rachel, have you seen any first-hand experiences that you can share of maybe customers you've helped where they've gone from going like, it's impossible to becoming a homeowner?
Oh, the most common one that we see are people where we meet somebody who's at the start of their journey. They might reach out as a client to say, look, we want to be put on a savings plan for the next 2 or 3 years to get into the market. And then we all have a meeting. We find out that there's another way for them to get in. And that might be something like a government scheme or incentive that they weren't aware of. Popular is, the parental guarantee, which we do cover in the book. And I think parents want to help their children into property, but a lot of the time they don't understand how or how, if they're able to do it. So I think people, firsthand is, people coming thinking that they're starting this big journey, but then they're managing to get into the property market earlier than they thought. So I always think to first home buyers that are starting their journey, I always say, reach out to a mortgage broker and start to get a plan in place. There's no point in having this goal that you're reaching for if you don't understand what are the guidelines, what do I need to get? So it's all goals, if they're measurable, are so much easier to achieve.
Absolutely. And you don't know what you don't know. So there might be schemes out there if you're a single mother, if you're a first home buyer, there's so many different ways, as you said. When I was buying my first property, they're like, oh, your parents could go as guarantors. You only need 10%. And I was like, what? I've got 10%. I can do that. And I was like shocked at how quickly I could actually get on the property ladder. But again, I didn't know about that until I spoke to a mortgage broker. So I absolutely echo what you said. I always say, reach out to a mortgage broker and have a chat with them.
You know, in that parental guarantee instance, I mean, there are people that borrow 100%. They don't need any deposit using a parental guarantee. So, you know, if your parents are willing and able to help, I think this is a good resource to read together.
Yeah. So you talk about layering some strategies like the government schemes, guarantors, rent vesting. What's one strategy you think is most underused in Australia at the moment?
Oh, I'm going to throw to Glen for that one here.
Yeah, this is probably my hobby horse, and it's probably the first home super saver scheme.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because, okay, let's unpack this, as I do with my psychologist often. We need to work out what our strategy is. So, at first, the strategy, it could be, yes, we live 3 hours out of a capital city. We can get our first home. It's not crazy and all that. Could be a nurse in Geelong or a plumber in Bendigo, or insert somewhere outside of Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne that's reasonable and all that. So it's like, okay, well, we do want to buy our first property to live in. So we know that we can look now at some options available. And the First Home Super Saver Scheme, it's really cool because you can effectively save $15,000 per year inside your superannuation fund. And it's effectively a tax flush strategy. So you can put up to $50,000 into that scheme. And you can do it, your partner can do it, and you may save, I would say, because it's all based on your tax rate, but most people, if they use the full scheme, could save $5,000 to $7,000 in tax just using that scheme. So there's some free money on the table there for those who want to look at buying a home to live in. And then off the back of all the changes to CGT and whatnot, people are like, oh, I can't invest in shares to save for my first home. Sad. Well, if only there was a scheme that you could invest in shares and still get the CGT benefits, and that's the First Home Super Saver Scheme. So that is a great scheme for those buying their first home to live in. And the best part is it can also be layered with state-based stuff, parental guarantees, LMI, this is a cake, and we wanted to use this book as the recipe book of how to layer and don't jump in the kitchen while I'm baking, all right?
I would say the most underutilized, I'm a little bit less patient than Glen, and it can take 3 to 4 years to use a First Home Super Saver Scheme, which is a great scheme for those people that are prepared and that understand how that works well in advance. I would still say the rent vesting parental guarantee, or free vesting, living at home with mum and dad and using a parental guarantee to get into the market before you're ready to buy your home.
That's scandalous, Rach.
I know.
So scandalous.
Yeah, and we do actually have a chapter about buying with friends and siblings in the book because it is becoming a lot more common, and there are things that people need to really consider before they do that. So I think it's a great option for people if they understand all of the pros and cons and they have a roadmap together before they start. So if people are thinking about buying with a sibling, there's a lot of questions that you'd ask first, like, what's the plan if somebody gets partnered? What's the plan if somebody wants their partner to move in? And what happens if one person wants to sell and another person's not ready? Because with these first home, stamp duty concessions, you get one bite of the cherry. So if somebody doesn't get enough equity out of that property to go again, it can actually really negatively impact them. So we encourage that. That's a really good way into the market, but we also encourage to understand everything and explore that before you start. I think if you're and I'm very public about this. So I bought my first investment property when I was very young, and I didn't consider, so you look at two things. You look at cost to purchase and you look at cost to hold. And I made the mistake of buying a lower cost to purchase, but it turned out to be a higher cost to hold. So, sometimes the lower property, especially I was rent vesting through my 20s. So there's a lot of ducking and weaving when you're going through that strategy. But the first lesson I learned is cheaper property does not mean cheaper cost to hold. And it was a long time ago, but I'll never forget that. I will never forget that lesson. It's going to be worth this in 10 years' time.
I generally do, yes. But
I'm his mortgage broker, I can confirm.
yes, Rach has seen. Well, to be fair, I don't know. Like, I'm not as capitalist property mogul as Rach, right? So in my strike rate of property purchases compared to Rach, obviously there's a lower percentage chance of mistake because I've had less goes of buying property. Now, I don't know if I've made any major whoopsies, but I do know one thing that comes to mind, particularly if you are a first home buyer and you want to live in it. And you both touched on it before, and it's particularly around the apartments. And I've seen this, we get house fever, and we've all had house fever, right? And like, you just need to know when you're looking at a property or a strata complex or whatever to buy to live in, that's totally fine. But if you fall in love with one, and there's a big but, like, as well, there's an extra $5,000 a year for these works, and half the building, the sinking fund of the strata thing, it's almost, there's so many arrears in the building, there's a lot of investors. You've just got to move on. There's plenty more apartments. And what I would say is request a strata report or as much detail as you can get from the strata manager or the agent. Now, this could cost a couple $100 each time if they're like, yeah, we can send you a report. It could be a 500-page report. Run it through AI and be like, what are the red flags most recently with this scheme? What do I need to look for? And if you cannot genuinely get a discount at buying, because if it was $600,000 for a 2-bedroom unit and there was $50,000 over the next 5 years per person, if you can't get at least that $50,000 discount, because you're going to pay it anyway, you've got to walk away. There are apartments everywhere.
And that's just what we have learned. We asked our money community about what they wish they'd known before they bought their first home. And that did shape a lot of the book, and we published that in there, that was one of my favorite parts. Oh, look, I think people that have bought a buyer's agent, and we talk to them about it, generally see great value in having used a buyer's agent. And I see that more often than not. Obviously, there's buyer's agents and buyer's agents, but as long as you're using someone that's really been highly recommended to you and they're a great buyer's agent, I see so much value. I used one myself when I bought an investment in a different state. Even being in the industry, I wouldn't buy not in my state, not using a buyer's agent. But the reality is a lot of first home buyers, when we're struggling to save a deposit and they're going in with that minimum amount, having a buyer's agent and the fees for one isn't a possibility for them. So I think a buyer's agent is great, but we've written the book assuming that you aren't using a buyer's agent, but also covering a little bit of chapter on buyer's agents if you're able to use one, because I see so much value, but it's just a sad reality that not everybody can afford that.
Glenn, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think it is a luxury, and that's okay. Yeah, I think as you grow in your financial vibe, like, I reckon next property I purchase, like, I'm not choosing it myself, whether it's a home to live in or an investment property, because if everyone Googles the Dunning-Kruger effect, the more you do stuff, the less confident you are in making the right decision. Because like, every time I go get my hair cut or at the barber or whatever, the dentist is like, oh, where should we buy a good property around here? And I'm like, anyway, so like,
yeah,
that was the dentist sucker thing in my mouth, and I can't talk to them. But like, I'm like, I don't know. I'm too scared to even worry myself. I'm not in the property world every day like a buyer's advocate. Yeah, apologies to your audience for my...
I was going to say, I'm sad for people who are listening to this and they're not going to get to see the video footage of you being in a dentist chair. Definitely 10 out of 10 for charades. I would love to know, someone picks up this book and then they put it down, they've read it all. What's that one key message you want them to take away with them?
I would say that if somebody felt encouraged and informed and ultimately made a better decision for their own property journey, having read the book, that would be our goal achieved. That's really what I think about what I would like to see when somebody puts down this book. I also think about when I'd like them to pick it up. So my dream is that maybe a parent were to buy this book for somebody when they're going through university or when they're first starting their journey. They read it and then they come back to this book when their knowledge and their confidence and, their journey continues. I think as long as they're making confident and informed decisions, that would be our goal.
I reckon I want people, and I know this book will deliver this, full-on clarity with their strategy, their why, and the actual asset type and what they're about, because part of when we buy a property, it's like, yes, buying a property is one part, but the next part, because life changes, right? Well, what happens if I buy this property and in 12 months' time, my life changes? Do we wait before we buy it? I don't know. I just want to provide, and I think the book does give people clarity and certainty about their own strategy, and also encourage them that there are things that they will learn that will ultimately enable them to get into their first or next property sooner. So if you've already got a home and you've never bought an investment property, this will scratch that itch, because I'm even like, when we read the audiobook, I'm chatting away. I'm thinking, oh, this is encouraging me to buy a property. Like, it's a good little read.
This stuff is so good. Who wrote this?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much. So it's the Quick Start Guide to Your First Property. It's out now. You can buy it, I'm assuming, at all good bookshops, at airports, online. So thank you so much for making such a helpful resource for Australians. You guys do such good work, such big fans here at Ladies Finance Club. And I really appreciate you taking out the time and coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Molly, and to all your listeners.